Hello and welcome to my impromptu little macro studio here. I've set this all up because Sony has just sent me the 100mm f2.8 G Master macro. Came in this very nondescript box, which I'm actually now using as a background for my dandelion IKEA level wall art. That's my goal today, is to just make some interesting sort of dandelion studies, but we're also going to take this out in the field. And this is a really cool lens because, you know, Sony's going through this process of now revamping a lot of their early professional lenses for E-mount, because it's been a while now, and we've seen this with like the 24-70 G Master, the 7200 G Master. We're seeing these replacements. Well, now we've got a replacement for the 90mm G lens. It wasn't a G Master, but it was their professional level macro for a long time, almost 10 years. And that 90mm f2.8 could achieve 1-to-1 life-size reproduction, which was, you know, basically the de facto standard for professional macro lens. But now 10 years has gone by and this is improving things. First off, this 100mm macro is giving us even better macro magnification, 1.4-to-1 life-size reproduction. And on top of that, as you see here, it can even take teleconverters and go even further. It should be a fun test to see just how far this new macro lens has come. I'm Chris Niccolls, this is PetaPixel, and these are dandelions. Now this new G Master lens has a lot of bells and whistles, and we've got better weather sealing, we've got image stabilization, more advanced autofocusing capabilities, and we're going to talk about all that. But in a controlled studio situation like this, those things aren't very useful because everything's mounted here. I've got my geared head here where I can make adjustments, got my focusing rails which I'm going to be focusing with manually. So really what I want to focus on here more is better light. And so for this kind of look, I'm going for soft, gentle, lower contrast light. But for this setup, I'm using my Westcott L120B continuous lights, and I really like these. I mean, they put out a lot of power, but I can also have them further away going through a large softbox just to give this really nice, even light. I can change the color temperature settings on them, so if I want to match ambient light or if I want to have a different color from each light to kind of give it a color cast, I can have fun with that as well. And I really like the consistency of these lights. I mean, clean colored. That's why we use them for our test chart, for our lens test. So if you're looking for a good, solid, continuous light where you can see exactly how it falls on your subject, I highly recommend these. You can use these for technical work, for macro work, for studio lighting. I really do rely on these lights all the time for our testing. Westcott is PetaPixel's preferred lighting partner. So classically, macro lenses would give us that 1-to-1 life-size reproduction, and it's rare that it goes beyond that. I've played with the Tamron 90mm macro. I love it. It's affordable, but it's limited to that 1-to-1 life-size reproduction. Having a lens that can go 1.4-to-1, that's pretty cool. And now the Canon 100mm RF does do that, but what it doesn't do is take any teleconverters. Here, Sony has sent me a 2x converter. I can throw it on there. Now that gives me a 200mm focal length if I ever want to use that for regular photography, but it also can double my magnification to 2.8-to-1. And as you can see here, that just gets me so much closer without having to crop and lose resolution. So I like this extra magnification in the studio. It's great under controlled lighting, controlled situations, but I also want to take this out into the field and just see how it handles some of the other situations we have where we're not doing focus stacking. We're not setting up things on a tripod necessarily. So I didn't use a quick release plate here, so just watch me unscrew this for like 5 minutes. There we go. All right, so we are out here. It's a beautiful autumn day out in the field. I don't know if there's gonna be any bugs around though.
Hey, Dad.
Maybe if Sony had sent this lens to us like a week earlier, it might have been okay, but we'll see what we'll see. There's still some flowers around. So I really want to take this out in the field and give it a handling test because there's actually a lot of handling changes on this 100mm G Master. So the first thing you're going to notice here is the focusing. The manual focus is a really nice large ring, but it also has a push-pull clutch mechanism. And just by simply pulling back, this engages into a focus clutch. It's by wire, but it actually feels pretty engaged. It feels very much like, you know, a linear connected helicoid. And this is just really nice for that precise focusing when I want to just have full control. But of course, this is also a really nice focus clutch if you want to use this for video work, where you want to do focus pulls and stuff like that. And we do also have an autofocus manual focus selector switch here on the side of the lens, customizable focus lock buttons, and we have an aperture ring which would be set for either click stops or smooth operation. So another reason why you might really like this for video stuff. I can even lock the iris into automatic mode if I want there. But it still doesn't end there. So we also have a full-time dynamic manual focus selector switch. This is a nice Sony feature where I can have the lens autofocusing, but then at any time, just grab the manual focus ring and readjust it. And that's really good for macro work where you might be close, but not exactly where you want it to be focused. That's a nice way to take control and change that yourself. We have focus limiter switches here. I can limit this to distance focusing or to minimum distance focusing or let it have full control. And I do have an image stabilizer in this lens, so I also have a selector switch there. Now this is actually pretty lightweight lens, 700 grams, not too heavy, 67mm filter thread. It does have a physical size to it, but it's very reminiscent of any other 100mm macro lens that I've used. And because this is a G Master, we now have proper weather sealing, and this will be a nice advantage over the older 90mm, which had some seals, but not what I would call full rugged weather sealing like this. So I know some guys complain about blue balls, but I actually find them to be a really interesting subject matter because like there's all these like hairs and fibers on them, and I just like capturing the sort of like roundness of them. And when you get really close to these blue balls, there's like this whole other world of interesting textures and stuff. So it's a really cool thing to photograph, in my opinion. So I'm trying to take a picture of this sunflower, which as you can see is blowing in the wind. So I figured this would be a good test for the autofocus capability. So the older 90mm had technically a linear motor, but it was their old direct drive SSM. This now uses a proper modern XD linear motor from Sony, and it's focusing very good. I mean, at distance, it's snappy, it's quick, there's no issues. But up close, I just want to see how well it can handle tracking at these very tight distances. I have limited the focus, just so you guys have context there, to try to help it out. And you know, this sunflower is just kind of pulsing in and out, not too quickly, but I still find that the tracking autofocus is having a bit of an issue following it and keeping up with it in an accurate way. So, you know, this is going to require burst shooting, I think, or more depth of field, or just, you know, multiple tries to really get it to work. But what I'm really looking for is an insect to test it on. I just think it might be too cold today. I love onion rings. I love eating them, but I don't love seeing them all the time. And the original 90mm macro did have some issues with onion rings in their bokeh and the specular highlights. And so Sony did specifically try to eliminate that here in the 100mm, and they've done a good job because as you can see, nice clean bokeh, no onion rings to speak of. The blade is a little bit more rounded as well now, so when you stop the aperture down, things stay relatively round. We're not getting any strong polygonal shapes. Bit of a soap bubble effect can pop up, but overall, bokeh on this is quite soft, and that's really nice when you're doing close-ups. You just want those backgrounds to melt away and just beautiful transitions from in focus to out of focus. Ooh, this bright sunny day. It's time for flare talk here. So macro lenses, flare isn't always an issue. I mean, you're not typically shooting towards bright light sources very often, but this lens does still have some flare. I mean, you can see you're shooting wide open at f2.8, good contrast, but just like a little bit of ghosting, which kind of costs us some detail. It's pretty minor. Stopping the lens down, you'll see a little bit more there to it, but again, it's not too bad. So I'd say it controls it pretty well overall. So we found a place here in the garden where there's a few plaques and stuff. So I thought, why not look at LoCA? Because longitudinal chromatic aberrations, where you get color fringing in the foreground and background out of focus areas, especially in places of high contrast that are notoriously difficult to get rid of in post, could be a real problem for macro shots where you're often shooting really close up, super shallow depth of field of things with some contrast. But as you can see here on the text, nice and clean. We're not really seeing any of that color fringing in a major way. So this is a great result. We're not going to have LoCA problems when we're shooting macro. Okay, so we've been on the hunt for some insects to do some testing for the autofocus, because Sony A7R5, a lot of modern bodies, they've got really good insect detect autofocus, and the tracking actually works really well. But we haven't been able to find many bees. But what what we did find is something that looks like a bee. So there's these flies that are kind of going around these garden beds, and they're drinking, you know, like nectar and water and stuff off of these things here. They look like bees, but they're not. But they got those cool compound eyes that flies have. And so we're getting some neat shots there. And actually, the tracking autofocus is working quite well in that situation, locking in on the head, getting us good details there. So in that regard, this seems to be working quite well. It's more so when I'm trying to focus on just things that are generic, like flowers, where I don't have a subject detection mode. Then I'm using just classic, you know, single spot tracking autofocus. And in those regards, my like results are kind of mixed. It's not always keeping up with the action. Sometimes it's, you know, sort of veering off, and I'm finding in those situations just clicking to manual focus or dynamically manually focusing to be a little bit more effective. But for the occasional insect, it's actually working really well. I'm going to see if I can find some more. Now, when we talk about lens breathing, which is where our field of view changes as we focus from near to far, most of the time we're talking about in terms of videography. If my field of view changes while doing a focus pull, it can look a little bit distracting. But for macro, it's actually really important when it comes to photography, because if a lens breathes too much and you're doing things like focus stacks, you actually have to then crop quite a bit to get rid of that change in field of view. And that costs you resolution, and that costs you framing as well. So as you can see here, there's a little bit of breathing in this lens. I mean, my focus stack worked out pretty well. I didn't have to crop too tightly. I feel this is a better result than what the older 90mm gave us, but there's still a little bit of focus breathing to keep in mind there. So if you are going to stack multiple frames, focusing all the way through, expect to lose still a little bit of that crop. We actually met a fan. She's a big fan of the show, a little quiet, you know, not very like outgoing socially, but anyways, agreed to let us take a portrait. And you know, actually macro lenses can often be really nice portrait lenses because they generally tend to have fast f2.8 apertures, and that 100mm focal length is really nice. But what I especially like about this is not only the sharpness, but also the actual cat's eye effect of the bokeh. It's actually quite extensive, and it goes quite close to the center of the image. So you can get this really beautiful swirly bokeh effect behind your portraits. So that makes this macro a little bit more versatile. Okay, so we've been finding these false bees all day, these flies that look like bees, but now we found some real bees, and this one's cooperating. He's being very still. It's a cold day. He's just hanging out. The wind is blowing, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to try my 2x converter here. I'm doing it handheld. I'm not using a tripod, so it's going to be a lot of luck and a lot of shooting and just hoping for the best. But at least give you guys an idea of the kind of magnification that you can get here. I am finding autofocus works, but I'm still finding it more reliable just to manually focus and recompose. Now, is it sharp? Well, let's take a look at our test charts here, because I was thoroughly impressed. You can see here, center detail at f2.8 is basically ideal. Stopping down at 5.6, I really didn't notice much improvement. If there's anything, it's incredibly minor. And the corners are also very sharp at f2.8. And again, stopping down, same thing. I mean, slight improvement, but this lens is designed to shoot wide open and give very good results, which would be nice if you're doing things like portrait work. For macro, I tend to stop down anyways, but regardless, I'm getting great detail. Also, of course, like most macro lenses, this is a very flat shooting lens, which means if you're focused in the center, the corners will also be in focus and vice versa. So that's really nice to have as well. Okay, so I've had a really fun time with this lens because it is a pretty cool feature-rich lens, but really getting out and evaluating these things, it's about figuring out if that's really gonna improve my quality of life that much or not. And in this regard, I think it's kind of a mixed bag. So some of the stuff that I really like, I mean, the build quality is fantastic, it handles really nicely, and I do love the optical performance. It's sharp, it's got really pretty bokeh. These are all important things, and it has versatility as a portrait lens as well. But even more importantly, I like the fact that I can not only get that better magnification, but also use a converter to get even further. And I think that's pretty powerful. I mean, if you're looking for a macro lens that has the option, albeit with some monetary investment, to get that extra distance, you can do it here now on Sony E-mount. And you see, I really wanted to take it out in the field today and use it handheld as opposed to using a tripod. I saved that for the studio because a lot of the improvements to this lens I feel suit this more run and gun macro kind of situation. So for example, image stabilization is nothing new to macro lenses, but the image stabilizer in this works with the body's IBIS really effectively. And that's great when I'm trying to handhold and get sharp pictures, and I was finding that is working, but also just to keep the framing more stable. It's just easier to find my subjects, keep them framed properly in the shot, and so I really appreciated the stability of this lens. Now, there's a bit of wind and stuff like that today, and that always makes it complicated, so we also got to test autofocus. The autofocus improvements here, I don't think were that useful. I mean, certainly insect detect is nice, it works, but it still doesn't always put the focus exactly where I want it. And I just found myself almost all the time clicking to manual focus and reshooting it because I want to get precise depth of field. The nice thing is the clutch. I actually found that to be far more useful than any autofocus improvements. I could use the subject tracking to get a bug, for example, in the frame, mostly in focus, and then just very quickly lock it like this, move back and forth a little bit with my head and get good focus. So at least in that regard, it was working well. Autofocus though, for portraits and stuff like that, perfectly fine. I mean, it works great, no issues there. Eye detect, all that kind of stuff is working fantastic. And so overall, I think that this new G Master has a lot of utility, but you are gonna pay for it. I mean, this is about $1,500. If you consider the 90mm macro, that's gonna be about $1,200. So for 300 bucks, I actually think it's worth it over that particular lens. I feel like this is giving me a lot of tangible improvements. But what about other affordable macro lenses like the Tamron 90mm? I mean, that's basically half the price. That's a fantastic lens optically. It might not have all the bells and whistles, but if you're primarily gonna shoot on a tripod or with external lighting and flashes and things like that, that might be a better, bang for your buck. Either way, you've got a very interesting macro lens here and you've got a lot of options across various price points. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Definitely leave comments below. Let us know what you think. Check out the PetaPixel podcast. You can find it on this same channel or all your favorite podcasting apps. And definitely look at getting a PetaPixel.com membership. You get to peruse the website ads free. You get to see our sample galleries. And you also get discounts on places like KEH.com, our merch store, and even money back at the Moment store. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon with more on PetaPixel.